Red-haired Shanks. Shanks, we love you, Shanks. After these recent chapters and seeing where exactly One Piece is in terms of the power hierarchy, I came to the conclusion that this man Shanks is a goddamn monster in retrospect. Everyone and their mothers love Shanks, and rightfully so. He's looked at as the Roger of his respective era and was the Luffy before, well, Luffy. And I'm not going to lie, he is probably the one character when it comes to hype and aura farming that I think of. But after the last arc of One Piece, I've come to the conclusion that this man is much more than what he's made himself out to be. Today we will not be breaking down the agenda or the memes. I'm going to be talking about how strong Shanks actually is within the lore and just how ridiculous he is. This is primarily a narrative video, if anything, and power scaling secondary, so even if you're not a One Piece fan, I'm going to be putting things into perspective for you. No Lovesick Part 3. Now, Shanks, even before his glory days, was always set up for greatness if I'm being real. After his mother requested Dragon, a future leader of the Revolutionary Army and the most notorious criminal on the goddamn planet, yeah, unfortunately he does nothing, but he got Shamrock and Shanks to safety where he'd eventually get him into a treasure chest like it was Fortnite. And I'm not gonna lie, when Roger found him, it was basically the equivalent of finding a gold scar because, oh my god, he did not realize that this child was destined for greatness. His mother would unfortunately be killed by his father, however, and Shanks eventually would be raised by the greatest crew in the era. Gol D Roger himself, the king of the pirates, would raise this child alongside with his other crewmates, and eventually he'd go on to start his own crew, of course, after the death of Roger. A new age has started and Shanks would immediately start off his journey, and during this time he'd come across Teach, an ex-commander of the Whitebeard pirates, who managed to give him a scar, but of course he had to face his past demons and eventually enter the Holy Land to claim his title as a world noble. Now, I know I just said a lot of stuff right now, so bear with me. Firstly, Teach was a high-ranking Yonko commander of the Whitebeard pirates, who at this point in the series was the strongest crew at the time. For Shanks to even survive an encounter with someone like Teach, who makes sure his enemies do not escape his grasp, is pretty impressive. And it's kind of crazy, right after this L, he has to go and enter pretty much one of the highest ranking lands in all of One Piece. Like, I'm talking you have to be level 80 or above to enter this land. So at this point in the series, not only was he affiliated and already established to be one of the greatest pirates of his era, but now he also has a high-ranking reputation in the world government. And I know a lot of people like to make fun of Garling, but say what you will, his reputation is the reason why some of y'all have him in your top 20 One Piece characters. Anywho, he's able to utilize, of course, one of the most ridiculous powers within the verse, that being Conqueror's Haki. Now, of course, we cannot talk about Shanks without talking about his most infamous power, so I'm going to be dedicating this brief section of the video to that. Now, Shanks is able to manipulate the power of Conqueror's Haki. Now, Conqueror's Haki is an ability only a handful of the strongest can possess, and he's able to use this power better than legit anyone in his generation. For those who are wondering what Conqueror's Haki is, basically flexing off your aura or your actual spiritual power is pretty much what it is, and it's just aura farming on another level. You're able to knock out people by just walking and just them sensing your presence. However, Shanks can take this to the next level and legit manipulate it like it's some kind of Wi-Fi signal and legit snipe people with haki, which is pretty ridiculous to think about. No one else in the series can do this. Shanks also has the special power of being able to see into the future while also being implied to be able to kill other people's future sight. Pretty interesting to think about, as I feel like future sight or being able to see your future within One Piece is a lot more important than just obviously in combat. It's supposed to be kind of more of a figurative sense, as we've seen with the Luffy and Katakuri fight. So for someone like Shanks, somebody that we followed and somebody that we're supposed to aspire to be, have a power that really doesn't seem like somebody of his caliber or someone as free as him would really have access to. And to the viewer, because Luffy likes Shanks and we like Luffy, we, for the most part, like Shanks. However, to the average upcoming pirate trying to set the sails to the Grand Line, this man is legit just the second coming of Jiren or Aizen. I'm not even kidding. Like, this is the type of spiritual pressure aura that this man has. And it's not even like it's on purpose either. Like, imagine me and you just chilling, having a drink at the bar or whatever, and this dude would just walk in having a bad day, he's really moody, and I'm like, whoa, Shanks, you alright? And then Shanks just glares at you and you just instantly have a seizure and die. This can happen to you whether you're a normal person or a high-ranking pirate slash marine within the world of One Piece. It is actually concerning how this man is both wholesome yet absolutely terrifying. Wait a second, this guy just might be Aizen. Anywho, we'd see Shanks come to understand his role and ultimately need to make a decision on who he wants to be, as he clearly sees the flaws in how the Holy Knights morally are. And after Gabon gives him some wise words and Loki defeats Harold, this leads into Shanks eventually going on to face Loki off screen. Now, I think it should be noted just how impressive this actually is, since Loki was capable of harming Harold with the Dami Reverse Eye, but he actually managed to defeat him and actually catch the attention of Emu himself. Mind you, to remind the viewer what Emu is, or for those who need an idea of what he is, well, you remember that entire war where Roger and everyone threw like a special move at him like it was Beyblade? Yeah, well, he is the guy that they threw those special moves at. This is the same man who can wipe out entire countries without a second thought, and yet the energy that Loki was emitting from his hammer was making this man sweat, which is honestly really ridiculous because the only other time, which is funny because the only other time where Emu has been shooken up in the series is when he sensed the knot of haki from Joy Boy, which mind you, Dory and Buggy only ever felt that type of energy from someone like Shanks. So this Elden Ring boss built individual managed to get a new weapon, one tap a previous Rock's rival, and Shanks just straight up beat him up and took his lunch money? Roger, of course, was Shanks' inspiration and the man who eventually showed Shanks the path and what he truly wanted for himself. But even before getting to that, it's kind of funny to think about in perspective that this version of Shanks already is pretty cracked. Not only was he a part of the greatest crew of its respective era, he was a part of the highest tiered faction within the world government, and survived an encounter with one of the most dangerous pirates within the world. Now, I know I've been kind of rambling around with the timeline, but pretty much we've entered the point of the story, like I said, where Shanks is now appearing to the viewer. He would manage to steal the Gum Gum fruit from high-ranking officers within the world government, specifically from CP9, and this should also be the point in time where Mihawk and Shanks were actively rivals, and we actually have statements about these two being on par with them. This should also be the point in time where Mihawk and Shanks were actively rivals, and we actually have statements about these two just being on par with one another, which suggests to us that legit, aside from Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman and arguably strongest person alive, Shanks without a doubt is the man that takes the number 2 spot, and during the pre-time skip era, he shows off that power pretty affirmatively. Now, after Luffy eats the fruit and Shanks aura farms some more, he bets his arm on a new generation, which I won't lie is a much more powerful moment after knowing what Shanks has been through. This is kind of headcanon-y, but I kind of like to think Shanks himself has this everlasting doubt due to the shackles of his past always being in the back of his mind. It's almost like he saw the best of himself in Luffy, and it feels like he almost wants Luffy to become king. However, we actually find out that this isn't the case, considering Shanks himself legit spawn camped and didn't want to encounter with Luffy until he took out what was arguably at the time the strongest man in the world, and somebody that Shanks actually just sidelined, but more on that later. It does seem to be the case though that even after Shanks lost his limb, this guy did not decline in power whatsoever, and if anything, he probably got strong. Once again, he'd claimed the title of Emperor or Yonko, which is the highest title a pirate can get to represent strength, and pretty much think of them as like the Kage but on steroids. He also still remained on par with the likes of his rival Mihawk and is stated to be the man closest to becoming pirate, which is pretty crazy considering this entire time he's not even looking for the One Piece actively, he's just legit chilling on the sidelines. But I think a good example of showing how strong Shanks actually was within the lore is his interaction with Whitebeard. Mind you, this is the strongest crew within the world, led by the only man who could stand on par with Roger at the time. And Shanks decides to just pull up on the ship, aura farm, and knock out the majority of his crew, with Jozu and Marco barely even keeping up their guard. And then Shanks would ask Whitebeard's best commander to come and join his crew and leave this bum-ass goon squad who just sits and scratches their ass all day. Whitebeard would make a note of how Mihawk and Shanks dueled as well, and it's something even he never forgot about, before then splitting the damn sky with zero effort. Mind you, Whitebeard is a guy who has been through many fights and has told many tales, and yet that Mihawk and Shanks duel is something that still has stuck with him. It's not really proof of any argument or, you know, like I said, agenda. That's not really what the point of this video is, but it is just some fruit for thought. And let me just ask the viewer if you don't know yet. Do you know what his next appearance consists of? He would then, intercept another Yonko who Luffy legit spent years in our time trying to beat up. Off topic, I hate Wano's pacing. He would then move in and intercept the strongest marine on the field and made a man who's made of legit magma, sweat, and fear And then the same fat bastard who tried scarring him wanted no smoke with him either after obtaining the arguably 2 strongest fruits within the verse. And all of these guys that I am just now mentioning are all contenders for being the most powerful within the One Piece universe. And they are all just at best of what a healthy Whitebeard actually was. And this version of Whitebeard was someone that Shanks was standing alongside in terms of power and reputation. And it's not like he's the only one just as strong. It's not like a Luffy and Straw Hat dilemma where Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are strong and the others just suck ass. We have multiple statements implying that the red-haired crew is actually very competent. They would scare the likes of admirals and legit mog on supernovas who are up-and-coming pirates like Kid. Anywho, just like how I broke down, in conclusion, Shanks just stopped the biggest war within the series that wasn't God Valley, and after this he'd go back to spawn camping and drinking until Luffy finally reached a checkpoint. Like I said, Luffy spent legit years in our time beating up Kaido just for Shanks to be like, oh wow, now we could start looking for the One Piece guys. Like, this man could have had it in probably like 2 days if he really wanted to, bro, if he wanted to lock in. And I know what you're thinking, Tyler, that's exaggerative. No, surely he can't be doing that. I mean, the way he was moving against Kid, goddamn, look at his leaps, bro. He probably could. Anywho, he then mog on an admiral again with just his damn aura alone and one-shot Kid. This guy is ridiculous. We just saw these 2 characters putting up big numbers against other Yonko, and Shanks did this to them. Not only does he have the highest rank and rep of both the government and seas, has the best manipulation of the strongest power within the series that you can get, he's also tanked on and scarred the best of the best. He's taken on and scared the best of the best and probably the character that you believe to be the strongest, with each of them all being a contender for being the most powerful. These country-destroying, island-splitting, and even world-shattering demons are something that Shanks isn't unfamiliar with, and he can mog on anything and anyone with just his aura alone. He stands above the rest as the strongest rat in history.